Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my W.A.T.E.R project, Water, by Malia Burrows. Welcome back to Water. My W.A.T.E.R project is about educating the African American community about the truths behind the misconceptions as to why black kids don't swim. The title Water stands for welcoming African Americans to engage in recreational swimming. Since COVID-19 has prohibited many pools from opening and or allowing swim classes, I started a YouTube channel to educate the public about swimming. My YouTube channel allows my project to be internationally accessible and sustainable beyond my involvement. The first video was about statistics on black swimmers. This video will be about the history, why a generational fear of swimming has developed. The root cause. The root cause of the problem is that the black community has inherited a generational fear of swimming. In the 1920s and 30s, thousands of pools surrounded by beautiful lawns and sundecks were built in the United States due to racial segregation. Black families were prohibited from using these pools and were often met with police force. Intimidation and physical violence were other tactics used by white people to keep black people from accessing the pools. The pools that were available to the black community were small, unappealing, and unsafe. For those black families that wanted their children to learn how to swim, they had to find someone who was willing to teach them. When they found a willing instructor, the price of the class was usually unreasonable. These issues and more are the root cause of why the fear of swimming has carried throughout generations of African Americans. An article by Philo Royer. His article was titled, Why Black Americans Don't Swim. Some might assume the fundamental reasons would be lack of money for swimming lessons or living in areas where there were no pools, but the reality is more complex. Fear of drowning or fear of injury was really the major variable. Typically, those children who could not swim also had parents who could not swim. Parents who do not know how to swim are very likely to pass on not knowing how to swim to their children.
Next question for you is, what do you know about the history of the African American community trying to swim at public beaches or pools?
My knowledge is from reading, and there was a time where African Americans were not allowed in public pools or in public beaches. As far as the beach is concerned, the only beach that was open to us at one point was Sandy Point. And as far as pools, other folks used to throw bleach in the pool and throw things in the pool that would make African Americans discouraged from being in it, and they would just tell them they were not allowed. There were signs that said no blacks allowed, but we've come a long way. We've come a very long way from that point now.
What motivated you to sign your child up for swim lessons?
When we first started the program over 33 years ago, my oldest daughter was in swim lessons, and they told us that she was too young to advance, but she was ready to advance. So my business partner and I decided to start a swim team. We started off with 5 kids. 3 of the kids were lifeguards at Teresa Banks Swimming Pool in Glen Arden, Maryland. And that's how we started the team.
What is one concern, if any, that your parents had about you concerning swimming?
So growing up, my parents never had too many concerns about swimming. I was in a very good program with great coaches, great leadership, and great friends. If anything, it was more so just the general concern of being around young kids who, they don't always make the best decisions, making sure that, I'm not bullying anyone, being bullied, hanging out with bullies, being kind to everyone, and being respectful towards others.
Thank you. How diverse do you consider the swimming community to be?
I think that over time, the swimming community has become a lot more diverse than, say, 50 years ago. I was not around at that time, but my coaches were, and so I've heard stories from back then. And I think that there's been tons of progress in terms of the funding that's gone into publicly funded pools, so that everyone can access a community program to swim, whether it's recreationally, competitively, or just to learn some basic survival skills in the water. I think that depending on where you go in the DMV or most anywhere in the nation, that the swimming opportunities there are probably closely related to the socioeconomic status of whatever neighborhood or county that you're in. But I do think that there's a lot of progress on the diversity of it and the availability for it. But there's, of course, a lot more progress, a lot more work that can be done.
Thank you so much.
How diverse would you consider the swimming community to be?
Depending on the area that you're swimming in, my summer league team is majority black, but when I go to my school, which is predominantly white, it's the complete opposite.
What do you know about the history of African Americans trying to swim at public beaches or pools?
I know that there was segregation, so I know that the white people would try to separate themselves from black people or just not even allow them into the swimming facilities.
What is one misconception about African American swimmers that society has created?
That black people can't swim, which is an absolute lie. Because I'm in an all majority black swim team and we're Division A, undefeated. You know that, interviewer. Anyways, there's a lot of all black swim teams. My rival team during the summer, all black. They're still pretty good, but not as good as my team. All black though. We swim.
What is one misconception about African American swimmers that society has created?
That black kids don't want to swim, especially the girls, because of their hair. They don't want to mess their hair up, but that's not true anymore.
How diverse would you consider the swimming community to be?
The swimming community is not really diverse at all. I would say maybe, I just would guess maybe 25 to 30%. But it seems like more African American kids are learning how to swim and are involved in swim teams, but there's not a lot of diversity in swimming.
What do you know about the history of African Americans trying to swim at public beaches or pools?
I don't know a lot, but I did see, since this is Black History Month, I did see a story on the news about I think a resort. Was it in New York? I can't remember exactly where it was, but the people in New York, in that section of town, weren't allowed to go to the public pools because they were African Americans, and they started their own resort and place where they were able to swim, and they're trying to bring that back now. So there was a story in the news not too long ago, but there's that's the end.
How diverse do you consider the swimming community to be?
I believe it's pretty diverse because I'm on an all-black swim team. I also like it on the swim team because it's like it makes me feel like the rest. It makes me feel like I'm with the rest of like people that I like and people that enjoy being around.
One misconception about African Americans in swimming that society has created.
One misconception is that black people don't like swimming because it gets our hair wet.
And why is that?
Because it takes a very long time for us to get our hair like naturally dry. Well, naturally healthy.
How diverse do you consider the swimming community to be?
In my years of swimming, the swimming community has become more diverse than what it used to be, but it's not that diverse. It's predominantly still white.
What is one misconception about African American swimmers that society has created?
We don't like getting our hair wet, and we don't like the way it feels because our skin gets a little dry afterwards.
Do you know about the history of African Americans trying to swim at public pools?
Public pools were not available to African Americans. We were given colored pools, and they weren't as nice, or they were run down versus the other pools in the past.
Did you ever learn how to swim, and why did you feel there was a need for your children to learn how to swim as well?
Well, I was a swimmer. When I came along in the 80s, I swam for my high school swim team. I swam for my club team. So I was a competitive swimmer. I went to DeMatha High School. I was the only black on the team at the time. So as a diversity question you asked last time, I definitely saw the change from when I was swimming in the 80s. So therefore, I always knew I wanted my kids to swim. I wanted to go on vacations and not worry about them sitting around the pool, and I knew they could swim. I was a lifeguard, so I understood the importance of water safety. I understood the importance of having kids to swim so they can have fun when they go on vacation, when they can swim with their friends. It gives them a sense of independence, in the water, that they can do things. It gives them a sense of confidence that they don't have to stand next to the wall and look at their parents and say, hey, look at me, look at me. They can go swim and enjoy themselves. Swimming is a great sport. It gives you endurance. It gives you exercise. It makes you fit. It gives you a sense of accomplishment, whether you go on to college or not. It allows the kid to understand what they have to do, because getting up early in the morning, going to a swim meet or going to swim practice is something that you have to do over time and time again. And it's a wonderful avenue for kids to learn about themselves.
How diverse do you consider the swimming community to be?
Well, basically, it's improved. When I first, as a parent, entered the swimming world in 2000, my daughter, Taylor, who's a coach now, was the only African-American kid on the pool deck as an 8 and under. You would have 30 to 60 kids down there, and she would be the only one. When my last child, who is now 21, swam as an 8 and under, the diversity has changed. There was maybe 20 kids down there on deck. So I saw over the years how African Americans have improved, have learned about the sport, have entered the sport and enjoyed the sport and excelled in the sport. So the diversity over the time, as we get more exposure and as parents go out of their norm and their comfort zone between basketball, football, and running track, which are sports that are predominantly done by African Americans, we have experienced other successes in the other sports. It's such a swim.
Why did you feel that it was a good idea to put your kid into swimming?
So because of all of the messages that we get that are dealing with race and swimming being a sport that we didn't have a lot of access to, it was predominantly white sport. And I thought it was important that my son had an opportunity to experience an all-black team and get the training. The training was top-notch. And the fact that he could swim with people that looked like him, and that would contribute to breaking the myth about black kids or African American kids not being able to swim. So it was pivotal in his overall confidence, and it's been a buoy to to his confidence as he's continuing to move forward and swim in high school.
How diverse would you consider the swimming community to be?
The swimming community is still minimally diverse. It's still a predominantly white sport. So if we're looking at percentages, I still think it's probably 95 to 90% Caucasian at this point still.
What is one misconception that society has created about African American swimmers?
That African American / black children cannot swim.
And why do you feel people have made that misconception?
A couple of reasons. Our educational system consists of nothing but miseducation. I think when you just deal with our history here in the Americas as opposed to dealing with the fact that we were kings and queens and we've had thousands of years of history prior to coming to America, that's one of the reasons. So when we just confine our histories to our experience here in the Americas, given the fact that we were unable to learn how to read, write, and what have you, it was very easy to keep us away from the water. But clearly, if you're coming from the continent of Africa, you're surrounded by water, so we were always water people. And just like anything else that we had the opportunity to get access to, eventually we dominated.
How diverse would you consider the swimming community to be?
Well, that's a great question, Malia. If I look at just, we just went down to Division D, but if I look at back when we were in Division A and you looked at us and Kingfish and Tacoma, you'd have thought that, there was a lot of blacks in swimming. But as we all know, when we go to, particularly when we're swimming during the year, the NCAP and those meets, people don't recognize just how good we are and how good our kids have been. So it's not diverse. It's just the short answer, but it's not very diverse. I think we've got a great community here. We had it, when we were in Division A with like the Kingfishers and the Tacoma Parks of the world. It is a problem, and even where I sit as an official, there aren't a lot of us as officials, and there's a big push to get more officials of color on the deck. So it is a sport that definitely needs to think really hard, and I know they are thinking hard, but it is difficult because of the lack of swimming facilities in many of our communities.
What is one misconception society has created about African American swimmers?
So, when you look at statistics, we definitely drown at a higher rate than any other community. And that's just a fact. Because back to your previous question, we don't have enough of us. And it's not about being competitive. I think that's a great thing about Teresa Banks and people like Coach Hank, who you don't have to be, particularly in the summer, you don't have to be a competitor. We can just teach you how to swim, how not to drown. And whoever listens to this, if your child does not know how to swim, let me beg you and plead with you to find a Y, to find a club. They do not have to be a competitive swimmer, but at least let them learn some basics of how to save themselves, how to swim, how to get to the edge of the deck and make it. And we as a community could do better with that.
Thank you so much for watching my video. Hope to swim with you next time.